gentlemen, I'm absolutely delighted to be here to support this event, and I want to congratulate the United Youth of Ireland for organising this event, and once again a hugely successful event. We mark today the UN Day for the Elimination of Violence Against Women, and we mark it in a particular way because on the one hand we're looking at ending the practice of FGM in Ireland and in Europe, and on the other hand IFRA always has this unique capability of saying it's also a celebration of the beauty of women, and she combines it with her fashion and beauty shows as well, and I think that's something that's very unique and very, very appropriate. Reference has been made already to the June 2012 resolution in the European Parliament, which was passed by the European Parliament, strongly condemning the practice of FGM and acknowledging that there are 500,000 women across Europe who are living with FGM. There are another 180,000 women who are at risk of FGM, and indeed it has also been stated that those figures may be somewhat understated, but they're the official figures that we have. So we can see that it's a huge problem right across the 27 and soon to be 28 members of the European Union. The resolution that we passed in June called very strongly for this to be taken up at a global level and called for the 67th UN Assembly, as requested by the African Union, to take up the issue of FGM, issue country-specific recommendations and guidelines, and work with national, regional and local authorities in relation to the implementation of those. The resolution says that FGM is an act of violence against women, and it is also a violation of the rights of the child, because as we heard that Beth so eloquently talking about the whole issue of FGM, and we know that FGM is practiced particularly on the child, which is a very, very brutal and violent violation of children. And calls on the UN authorities, civil society and national governments to allocate financial resources and put financial instruments in place to support information programmes and to disseminate information about FGM. And it urges the European Commission to ensure that FGM is included in any of its gender-based violence programmes, and that it features very much to the fore of that. And it also urges the Commission to give a specific allocation to FGM as part of the overall strategy for the elimination of violence against women. And it urges all Member States to take action. As many of you here know, Ireland has at last taken action, and largely due to the very campaigning spirit that IFRA has undertaken over the years. We're joined here tonight, I should say, by Joe Costello, TD, and Joe has been somebody in the Labour Party, my own party as well. We have campaigned consistently for this throughout the 1990s and the early 2000s, that the issue of FGM needs to be tackled by Irish legislation. IFRA, since we've met IFRA, she has been very much a force with all Irish legislators to try and ensure that this legislation is forthcoming. The Labour Party introduced legislation in 2002 to try and deal with the issue of FGM. It wasn't accepted at that stage, but we were very pleased that one of the first pieces of legislation that the Labour Party enacted in government was the Female Genital Mutilation Act, and we had some, we marked that last year as well with IFRA, and actually we marked it just around the time that the European Parliament resolution came to being as well. But it took a decade of campaigning. It took people like Joe Costello, like Liz McManus, like Ivana Bacci, who all worked relentlessly to ensure that we did get this legislation, and that's something that is good. Just at European level as well, maybe it's just interesting to note as well that just 2 months ago as well, the European Parliament adopted a directive for minimum standards of victims of crime across the European Union. And while we were looking for victims of FGM to be specifically recognised within this directive, and that didn't happen because the Commission said that then victims of various different specific types of gender-based violence would have to be named, and then people might become offended that certain crimes weren't listed. But nevertheless, it has been acknowledged, and again amended my speech on the victims of crime legislation, we did state that it was very important that this legislation is open to victims of FGM. One of the recommendations of that directive is that there needs to be specific guidelines and specific supports put in place by police forces in all European countries, and they have to take cognizance of the specific and unique circumstances of the particular crime, and it refers in general to gender-based crimes, so that if a woman is a victim of FGM, that each of, and no matter what European country she finds herself in, that there has to be special supports in terms of counselling, in terms of translation, if it's required, and in terms of specific supports there with the police force concerned, like maybe that somebody would request that a female officer would talk to the victim as well. So all of those minimum standards have been put in place now. The directive has been adopted. It's been adopted by the Council, and it is intended that the Member States have 13 to 14 months to actually implement that directive. Next year is the Irish presidency, and in keeping with the spirit of the European Parliament resolution, I think that it is important that we do continue to engage in educational and dissemination activities in relation to FGM. And as a member of the European Parliament, I was very glad to be there when IFRA did the exhibition in February of this year, highlighting FGM, and we hosted that exhibition in the European Parliament. And I hope that I will be able to work with IFRA next year during the Irish presidency, and that we may do some kind of a seminar or some kind of a dissemination event in the European Parliament to mark Ireland's commitment to dealing with the eradication of FGM. So just once again to say well done to everybody here. Thank you all for your support. We have the legislation in place now, but there is still a lot of work that needs to be done in terms of education, dissemination. We need to ensure that the various resolutions that we pass at European level are actually implemented at national, regional and local level, and that's where people like IFRA come in, because they ensure that this happens on the ground. I'm very honoured to be here with you tonight and to be invited to address here tonight, so thank you very much.